I've got one of my very longest tenured clients. We started working together in the very low 7 figures. We are now over 8 figures, still growing, still seeing spend increases. It's been an incredible journey with a great brand called Adapt Naturals with Chris Kresser. Chris is on the show today to talk about why the business model that he has works, why his product has been great, and the tactics we use to support those things, including something I think people will like a lot, which is how we leverage AI to generate a huge volume of output of ads and other things without it being spammy nonsense. Like I think Chris is really the first person I ever worked with who integrated AI very carefully into his workflow in ways that really generated a huge impact on the business, basically at every part of the business, including at the level of creative, including at the level of meta ads, without it turning into just like spam. It's really, really something. And so if you've heard me talk about the way production costs are changing and those sorts of things, you're going to like this conversation a lot. Really, we've seen a ton of success in this business. It's been really fun. Chris is a great guy selling a great product. And so we're going to break it down here. Technically speaking, this is a sponsored episode from my friends at FERMAT. And if you've heard me talk about FERMAT before, you might have heard me reference a client who had a 50% spend increase when they switched over to FERMAT. This is that client. So we're going to actually break that down. We actually only talk about FERMAT for like a few minutes later in the call. So it's not all about that. It's really about the total business and things that we've seen work. I can tell you for sure that Chris is not lying about what's working in this business because I have access to every number that he has talked to. And I think there's a lot to learn from it. So I'm really grateful to Chris for sharing very honestly about his business, about what's going on, and transparently. I think you're going to like this episode a whole bunch. Strap in. Let's do it. All right, it's the first time, at least in a very long time, that I've had one of my actual clients on the show, Chris Kresser. We have been working together for a while now. We're like a year and a half into this thing. How you doing, man?
Wow, has it been that long? Sometimes it feels like just the other day, and sometimes it feels like 10 years. But it's good to be here. I'm honored to be the first client on the show.
Yeah. It's I think we started September 2023. And yeah, I need to pull up like what the growth has been like since then. But it has gone well. It's been a great experience. I think, I'm just pulling it up. We started at, I'm looking now, we won't go into all the numbers, but we started at 30 grand a month in spend. And it's higher than that now.
I think the revenue tripled last year. So it was a great year. It was a fun ride for sure.
Yes. And spend has grown massively since then. And certainly not overnight. This has been one of those stories, I think, to contextualize this for people listening a little bit, where it's been some of the most like steady and consistent growth over time, as opposed to like, we launch an ad and everything changes. I mean, in the early days, we got to a 6-figure spend pretty fast, but then after that, it's kind of more like pile one thing up after another. And so what I want to actually do, when we started, you had in your first year, you had done a little over 7 figures, like kind of around pace to do that when we started. Now we've passed 8 and we're growing, like you said, tripled last year, like lots of good signs. So what I want to do is just kind of talk through why your business is working, why it's going so good and what people can learn from it. As we've worked together for a while, I think it's been a place that a lot of the things I believe have been reinforced, frankly, and then a couple little things have been tweaked along the way too. But maybe, Chris, you can just tell people about you a little bit and your journey to starting Adapt Naturals, and then tell them about Adapt Naturals and what it is.
Sure. Yeah, I started out as a functional medicine clinician, just treating patients one-on-one in the clinic. And I had started an online platform before I did that. So I was fortunate to build a full practice very quickly right out of school, and quickly became apparent to me that I was going to bump up against hard limit of how many people I could help. And so a few years into my practice, I launched the Kresser Institute to train other doctors and healthcare providers in functional medicine. We ended up training, it's still going actually, but we've trained 650 doctors in 38 countries. Then we launched a health coach training program in 2018 and ended up training almost 3,000 coaches in over 50 countries before we decided to wind that down. And my perspective has always been like, how can I make a bigger impact? Like, how can I help more people? It's always been frustrating to me that, in functional medicine in particular, which is not really accessible through the healthcare system, and, is expensive and just inaccessible for so many people. Like, how can I translate the clinical experience I've had and the lessons I've learned over the years into something that can affect more people, that can really help more people over time. And so that was where the idea for Adapt Naturals came. I obviously, as a clinician, worked with supplements for many, many years. I had my own chronic illness in my mid 20s to almost to the mid 30s, like a decade long, really serious chronic illness. And supplements were a big part of my healing journey. So I had a lot of experience with them. I wanted to be able to, again, translate that experience into products that people could really trust and that would make a real difference in their lives, where they could feel the results immediately, and that would actually address the root causes of their health problems rather than just kind of putting Band-Aids on. So we launched in late July of 2022, and had some great success early, right from the start. And then just has been a really fun process of growth since then. And I think the products work really well, as evidenced by the reviews, and we seem to be making a great connection with our customers, and that's what makes me the happiest. Like, just to read the reviews, like that one I sent you the other day, Andrew, like somebody, like serious health problem for 2 years and started on this supplement, and within like 3 or 4 days that problem is gone. I mean, that's incredible. That's like really what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, it is crazy. Somebody, if you're watching this, go to adaptnaturals.com. You want to get some sense for this brand, go read some of the reviews. It is crazy what people are saying. And I think it speaks to something that is true. When you first reached out to me about working together, my response to you was like, in so many words, like, are you sure you're not slinging total BS? Because it's like supplement industry. Yeah. And your response was totally non-defensive, which I really appreciated. You were just like, yeah, you probably should ask that. Like, there's a lot of BS in supplements and all that. But that's a helpful bit of context too, because that's the kind of business we're talking about here. And just like, I think there are a lot of principles that work across a lot of different types of brands. The supplement component of it is important because, of course, like one of the key things for us has been to focus aggressively on subscriptions, and to think about that along the way. And then generally speaking, supplements, I would say, I don't think it's news to say it's a great business model if you can make it work. So what I want to do is take this in 2 steps. I want to start by thinking about the bigger business and the ways that we think about the bigger business. And then I want to move into some tactics that I think have helped us execute on what is already a really, good model, basically. So we can start with the larger business model and then do tactics in support of that. This fits with a lot of what I have been thinking about recently, which is just that, like, you have to have both of those. And it is very easy for people to say it's all about a great business model, it's all about great core economics, but then they don't really ever get anywhere because their tactics stink. And then on the other hand, there is this other way of looking at it, which is like, people are just sort of tactical everything. And that's all the advice all the time. Here's how to set up your ad account and all that. But if you have a bad business model, those are really going to be limited in how far they can get you. And so I want to kind of do both in this conversation and think about that. So let's start with the core business model. And I actually think that starts with the product and what we just talked about a little bit, which is the reviews. So, you just underplayed a little bit of your reputation in the space. Some people probably know you who are watching or listening to this because they've probably followed your health stuff, but like, you're like a world-renowned functional health expert. And so came into this with really, really deep knowledge. And maybe the place to start here is like, what makes Adapt Naturals products different than other supplements in the space? I'm actually curious how you're going to frame this quickly, even after we worked together for a year and a half. Yeah.
Well, I think
I know how I've framed it to other people when I've talked about it, but I'm curious how you will.
Yeah. So I think the underlying factor that makes it different is my experience, because the reality is there's a lot that you learn after 15 years of treating thousands of patients and training hundreds of healthcare providers and training them in protocols that they then go out and use with their patients and then come back with feedback for me about what worked and didn't work. You cannot acquire that knowledge in any other way, even with AI and all the crazy tools that we have available to us now. That's just, real world experience that taught me what works and doesn't work, where the pitfalls and red flags are, what form of a nutrient is best to use in what situation, what dose actually works versus just fairy dusting and including a bunch of ingredients so that you can list them on the label. How you combine nutrients together to create a whole that's more than the sum of the parts. What supportive nutrients you can add to a formula to make it work better along with the primary nutrients. I think that is where it starts. And then from there, we use evidence-based ingredients. So we're not just chasing the latest trend. We use ingredients that are backed by science, published peer-reviewed research. We use premium quality ingredients. So we're, as you know, Andrew, meticulous about sourcing. I will, test and analyze 12, 14 different versions of a particular ingredient until I find the one that I like. We are pretty obsessive with R&D and product development. We go through several different iterations of a formula before we land on the one that is going to work. And then, I have an approach that we've come to call, at least loosely internally, Supplements 3.0, which is, Supplements 1.0 was just like take this one nutrient, see what happens. Supplements 2.0 was, taking more nutrients, combining them together. But Supplements 3.0 is a really carefully curated approach, which uses one key nutrient and then two more or three more that extend and complement the benefits of the first. So those are our most successful products that have leveraged that hypothesis. And yeah, I'd say when you put none of those things on their own are unique. There's lots of supplement brands that are doing one or the other, but I think we've been able to combine them together in a strategy that really works.
Yeah, maybe if Supplements 1.0 is like your basic multivitamin, that kind of thing, Supplement 2.0 might be like expanding into more interesting types of things, like the proliferation of organ supplements or colostrum, right? Something like that, right? But if you look at like the Adopt Naturals colostrum supplement, right? It's colostrum plus, which is like colostrum, but then there's also like a couple of other things in there that are key ingredients to sort of maximizing the value of it, because there's really no reason you have to take only one ingredient in supplement, right? So it can be done at the formulation level in this way that's really fascinating to sort of maximize the value. And then with this like meticulous approach to things like dosing and all that, which you've talked about. And this is probably a good place for us to just mention briefly our first foray into one of the things I think that you're great at, which is you were one of the first people to really push me and around us on the use of AI. I just wonder if you can talk about how you've used AI to stay up on studies that are coming out, because this is actually one of the things that really strikes me about you that really goes into the product, which is like, I mean, you personally formulate the products, first of all, but then secondly, every week there's something in Slack about like some new piece of research that comes out or some meta-analysis or something supporting an ingredient we use or a dosing we use or something like that. And I know you've done that manually for a long time because you were doing this before you were starting to use AI for it. But like, can you talk about a little bit about how you use AI to do that? And we'll talk more about AI in a little bit, but there's a couple of these cases where AI as like an increasing leverage tool. I think like you just do, instead of like a magic box, which does everything for you, like you have done this incredibly well. And so this is one of the areas I love to think about this.
Yeah, there are a few different ways. I mean, one is in the past, if I wanted to go find a study on a particular subject, I would go to PubMed or Google Scholar and type in search terms and then start just clicking through and reading the abstract. If that was interesting, then I would get the full text and read that. And that takes a long time, as you can imagine. And now there are tools like consensus.ai, which is basically an AI powered search engine for clinical research that, unlike other AI engines, it doesn't hallucinate studies. It's just pulling from published databases of studies. And so now I can do a search in Consensus AI, and it will return a carefully curated list of studies based on criteria that I've entered, and then it will give me all the key highlights of that study. Was it a human trial? Was it an animal trial? Was it an RCT was an observational study I can just go so granular, and then I can just, it probably like speeds up that part of my workflow by 80%, or let's say cuts 80 or 90% of the time. So then I can use the time to actually read the studies, which I still do. And then another piece would be, then I've read the studies and I want to summarize them in a way that I can easily refer back to them, or use that document as a foundation for something I'm going to write. Then I can use either Claude or now Deep Research, ChatGPT Deep Research, or another tool like that to create a really intelligent, high-level research brief. And then that brief can become the basis for like an email that I write, or a social media post, or a meta ad video script, or something like that. So that's one of the big ways we've used AI. Another way that's not so much me, but my team, has been in data extraction and analysis. So my ecom director is phenomenal at that. We can, for example, just take all of the customer reviews and export them in a CSV format, upload those to any of the LLMs, and ask it to analyze the reviews and come back with actionable insights about our customers, which is just phenomenally valuable, useful tool to have. And we've leveraged that in different ways, as you know, Andrew, like everything from creating customer avatars, and instead of hiring a market research firm and doing that based on qualitative research and phone call interviews to a few customers, you can create them based on actual reviews. We've had even our UGC videos transcribed, so we can include them in that process. So I think it creates a much more realistic profile of your customers, and you can even have actual quotes from those reviews as part of the avatar. So it's, those are two examples that stand out, but we're finding new ways to use AI every day.
Both of those represent to me AI as a tool for getting a mass amount of information into something that you can actually sink your teeth into. And that I think is some of the, it's sort of under talked about in D2C e-com. Everybody wants to make AI ads. And I've got other clients who are doing some of that in certain ways. We certainly are leveraging AI in our ad creation process in meaningful ways in Adapt, but we're really using it especially to take a whole lot of complicated medical scientific information and turn it into something that's digestible in different kind of formats, both internally and then customer facing ways. And I think it's sort of one of the most compelling uses of AI that I can think of, because it is doing something that's extremely labor intensive for humans to do. And there's really not a lot of sort of value to doing it yourself. It's actually just, you miss things and it's clunky, right? In this case, it actually allows you to get that faster. I think that does show up. Go ahead.
Another example of that is I'm I have a research background, and I've tend to write in a way that is pretty technical. It's like any domain expert, right? You can sometimes, it's hard to remember that, oh yeah, people even the term bioavailable, that's not, sometimes I've had conversations with people and they're like, what does that actually mean? I'm like, oh yeah, I forget. That's not just like a kitchen table term necessarily, but there are lots of other examples of even, more unfamiliar terms. Sometimes I'll upload something that I've already written to ChatGPT and just say, pretend you're totally unfamiliar with health and wellness stuff. What doesn't make sense, or how would you change this in a way to make it a little easier to understand? And that's been super helpful too. So it's really great for gaining insight. That's what it's a superpower for that, in ways that, if you spend enough time, you could do it yourself, but this is like a cheat code.
Yeah, that notion of pulling together a bunch of reviews and then turning it into actually an avatar. Jess Bachman talked about this on my show recently as well. The notion that you would do that and be able to talk to your customers basically to these avatars is just really cool. The other thing is, I think this stuff shows up in the product, and I think it's just really important to put this on. I'll say Adapt has the best customer LTV of any brand I've ever looked at, bar none, including by the standards of like supplement measurement. So just like, there's just no, I've looked at other supplement brands, like a subscriber in Adapt is worth so much money to the brand in revenue. And because the retention rate is so high. And now that's really important because it's very expensive to acquire supplement customers, right? Like it just is. And that's just the reality of basically every supplement brand, no matter how good your advertising is, it's just a hard, especially subscribers. It's like those are the most valuable customers. Lots of people want them. So it's expensive to acquire them. So they have to be worth a lot of money, but it makes the game so much easier and allows us to be so much more aggressive because of that fact. And the thing about that is that is a reality because of the product quality. I think like that if people didn't like it so much, if people weren't getting so much benefit from the product, they would not come back so often, Yeah. And so that combined with, of course, the unit economics of supplements, which are very good, make it a like incredible D2C business. And so like that is sort of the core driver of it. But crucially, I think we have also, you are also the most religious of any client I've ever had about sticking to like keeping an updated forecast, both at the level of sort of P&L cohort forecast and then especially at the level of cash, because in this business, it makes no sense to be profitable on first purchase. We acquire at a loss. We do that very much on purpose. But that creates cash challenges because now your money's going out the door. I'm just curious, like to hear you, it's actually something I've never asked you, to hear you talk about, I brought the cohort forecast to the business. And by the way, if you're watching or listening to this and you want the cohort forecast for yourself, you can get the foundation of it, the template of it for free on my site. So just go to ajfgrowth.com, drop your email either in the footer or in the pop-up there. That'll opt you into my newsletter, and I'll send you automatically basically the exact document that I use to build cohort forecasts. So if you hear this and want to use that, you should do that. But I brought that, and then you tied the cash forecast to it with some help from your friend of mine, Bill D'Alessandro. I'm just curious to hear you reflect on that. Like, you have been so meticulous about that. Is that just kind of like who you are, or like, what happened?
Yeah. So, this is not my first business. I ran a busy functional medicine clinic for many years, one of the biggest functional medicine clinic on the West Coast. And then I had Kresser Institute, which is a big educational training institute. Both of those businesses had significant cash flow challenges because they had strong seasonality. People, for example, don't tend to go to see functional medicine clinicians much in the summer. They're just like traveling or hanging out with their family or whatever, they still have health problems, but they just don't go to the clinic as much in the summer, and then they don't go as much in December. For our training programs, we did 2 enrollments a year. So we had basically, it was like feast or famine, right? We'd have, big influx of cash when we launched the program, when we launched a new cohort in the spring and then another in the fall. And then, but we would plan and work for the next cohort, but we didn't know what our numbers were going to be until we actually launched the cohort. We had projections, but it was always a question of whether we would meet those. So I learned to be very careful about cash flow forecasting and cash planning. And I learned that the hard way, as you often do. And so when we started this business, I brought that into that previous experience in. And then, as you said, I realized pretty early on that we were not going to be acquiring customers profitably. And that then the key, therefore, to our success was going to be managing cash in such a way that we were able to acquire customers at a loss without losing our shirt. Right. And in order to do that, you have to be meticulous about cash flow planning and forecasting, and it has saved us so many times. Yeah. Where we were like, look forward like 3 months in advance. Okay, wow, we're going to go into the red there because we've got an estimated tax payment, 4 different inventory POs coming due, this payment coming due. And so I'm going to go out to my co-mans and ask for extended terms. I'm going to go get a line of credit. I'm going to do whatever it is that we need to do to address that. And those are things you can't do right at the last minute.
That's
We've
right.
all heard stories of e-com businesses going bankrupt because they couldn't pay their tax bill, or because they had too many POs outstanding or whatever. So it's not only helped us to avoid problems like that, it's also helped us to make intelligent decisions about growth. If we see, oh, look, we're starting to accumulate cash here. We're solidly profitable. We're at or above our net margin target. We don't need to be accumulating more cash here. So let's see how we can deploy it to grow more, which is what the recent conversations that you and I have had. How can we spend this wisely? So it's an unbelievably valuable tool. I couldn't imagine running a business without it. It's just that important.
Yeah, especially as we've moved more and more towards like really building the business focus around acquiring subscribers and getting our best customers. Like that means you're even acquiring more at a loss, right? We used to not do that, and sort of took subscribers as part of it, acquire customers at sort of like a very small loss to start, but not a big deal. But now it hurts on first purchase, right? When we're successful.
I try not to look at it, but the reason I don't need to look at it and I still sleep well at night is this forecasting, because
that's right.
And it's actually even the thing that enabled me to get to the point where I said, yes, let's focus on acquiring customers and spend that much, because I can see from the cash forecast that this works out very well in the end. And I also know that if anything is going to change, we will have advanced notice of it because of this forecast. I'm not going to be caught totally surprised.
Yeah. And I know another thing we did, because in the beginning we didn't acquire at a loss, right? In the beginning it was like, no, we really want to make sure we don't run out of cash. So we got, especially bootstrap business, we've slowly gotten more aggressive over time as cash has allowed. And I think that's been a good move. I think actually more bootstrap founders, or more founders, ought to think that way about the stages of business, because even if they don't have your LTV dynamics, LTV does build slowly over time. Like on day one of your ecom business, you have $0 in returning customer revenue. And so whatever your CAC is, that is the percentage of ads on your P&L on that day, right? Like now and over time,
if you're a 100% self-funded brand like me, that's very important. If you're a venture funded brand that's just like burning money to grow as fast as you can, that's a different story. But even then, I would argue that you could make an argument for trying to be profitable at that early stage as just a healthier way to run the business.
Yeah, and what I think also it allowed us to do, right, was like it also allowed us to, because when I built that forecast initially, the mentality around it that I saw, we didn't know how true it would hold. You're building these forecasts, these cohorts 6 months, 12 months in advance or whatever, and they're built off of very small initial cohorts, right? People who came because they listened to your podcast and they love you. And so it's like, wow, are these future customers going to be the same as those? And what about Facebook customers versus others? And you got all these questions, what about product A versus product B? What about offer A versus offer B? All of these things, right? And so in the early days, we actually had to prove out the forecast was reliable. We did make changes to it at different times, right, in terms of what the cohort expectations were. And then as we did that, it allowed us to go, okay, now we're in a spot where like we are actually hitting our returning customer revenue numbers over and over and over again. These actually are pretty reliable. Now we feel pretty comfortable taking a risk, going like we can be a little more aggressive here because we're very confident that at no point has our cohorts changed. And I think that exercise in the first 6 months to a year of getting aggressive about ad spend in particular, it doesn't matter as much if you're not spending much on ads, but if you're spending on ads and you want to think about what kind of CAC you should exist at, that period of time where you are sort of, again, like religious about it, like you've been updating cash flow, connecting the cash forecast directly to the cohort forecast, like it is just a really, really helpful and important thing. And then you can kind of make longer term decisions from there, like you said, to where now we're going like, okay, how do we deploy cash more effectively to keep growing the business?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that to me, if I think about the big picture of why this business has been successful, and it really has been like a kind of at every step of the way, not without challenges at times, but been really successful along the way. That to me is the starting point of it. As I was thinking about this conversation, I was thinking like, what would I want somebody to hear from having like worked with you for a year and a half? It's like incredible product, good core business model, which is supplements sold on subscription, of course. And then meticulous cash planning. I think those three things have been really core at sort of the big picture level. I do want to talk a little bit about the tactics as well that have been part of that. And so actually, I mean, there's a lot of things that I could think of here. But I'm curious where your mind goes first, just having worked together for a while and some of that on sort of like key things we've invested in meta ads that you have. I don't know. I wonder if there's anything that you had expectations for coming in versus what we did. I mean, you had worked with other agencies ahead of time. And so I'm sort of curious, sort of like what stands out to you about the way we do things tactically, and maybe that you've come to see or believe or change minds on or whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I don't have very much expertise on the media buying side. I just have trusted you and Daniel with that. And you've done a phenomenal job, and I understand what's going on, but I'm not intelligent enough about that to really like analyze that piece of things. But there are a few things I would say in general. First of all is your attention and meticulous approach to cohort forecasting and looking at the numbers. Like I having worked with other media buyers in the past, that has not been the case. People had varying levels of attention to it, but I was always felt like I was a little bit in the dark and not knowing what was going on and what I could expect in the future. And given what I just said about how much attention we pay to cash flow planning and forecasting, that's been a really important part of things for me, is just to know what your economics are, know what the LTV is, know what you can afford to spend, know how long it's going to take you to get paid back, think carefully about, this has been part of our recent conversations, and I know this is a topic of conversation in e-com in general. It's like incrementality and halo effect. Like, we spend a lot on Meta, and then we see a big lift on Amazon, but that's actually not factored into our ROI calculations, so maybe we should do that. Maybe we should, right. Because maybe it will lead to us spending more money and growing faster in a way that we wouldn't if we weren't considering that. And so I think you're like really paying attention at that level of detail and getting super granular has been a big part of it. On the creative side, I think it's been, I guess I'm a little bit surprised, because when I was coming into the Meta world, I always heard like nothing can be more than 30 seconds long. If it's a video, it's got to be like super, attention grabbing and thumb stopping. And I'm like, that's not me. That's like not, if I'm going to be in the videos, that's really not my personality. As anyone who's watching this or even listening to this can probably tell. I like to geek out on this stuff, and I want to like talk about the products in a way that really educates people and helps them learn something, even if they're not going to buy it. And like, I just trust, I trust that people generally want that too. Like they want to understand what they're doing. And so I think that's been one of the bigger surprises for me, is that we've got ads that are 4 minutes with me talking, in pretty considerable detail about the products, and they're working. Like we have also different ads, static images and stuff like that, but just a like really relentless kind of creative iteration process that has been part of our success.
Yeah. And certainly you've tried, the ad account has tried a lot of things, right? You've tried like sort of 30-second to a minute, sort of UGC style, like, I don't know, young female, like
the typical UGC thing that you see.
Exactly. There, right. Yeah. And then we've tried plenty of statics and plenty of things like that. We've tried, at one point we went and tried like, what happens if we really up the like
production value and
editing production value, right? And we like really pay super, and then at other times we've just like launch. And so we've really tried it all in this account. And that's been interesting too, right? Because there's definitely I had beliefs about what would work and what would not work in this account. But one of the things I've found in client relationships in general is that, like, I remember at some point, Chris, you were like, what if we did ads? At some point we had stalled. And so it's like, okay, what do we need? What assumptions do we need to revisit? And that happens, right? This is probably an important note. Like, it has not been like every time we launch something new, it just like works great. Like we've hit plateaus multiple times. It's hard. Like you're convincing people to spend good amount of money on something they're going to ingest into their body and they're going to try and fix real problems with. So it's not an easy sell, I think. And also, like, you have integrity, so we don't overpromise too much. We abide by the FDA rules about what we claim and stuff like that, right? So you sort of take some of those maybe black hat things out of the playbook, and there's a challenge there. But as we've done that, like, one of the things that we definitely, or one of the things I've learned is like, you had an instinct at some point to go like, well, what if we up the production value? And it's like, my thought was like, probably won't work. Could be wrong. Maybe in this category where maybe we've got an older customer mostly, like maybe we try that, And so we tried it and it didn't work. And it's like, okay, so now you kind of go back and revisit assumptions. And eventually we land on this place of just like, no, all the core assumptions that we've had for a while seem to kind of hold, which is like manual bids, creative iteration, give people the information they need to make a purchase, worry a lot about that, create a lot of variations. And then we've just sought endlessly to do creative output and creative expansion, right? That's like been a crucial thing here. So we've run a lot of stuff through you, and specifically through your page, actually. You again have influence in the space. So having your page has been a really big help, whitelisting with you. But then also, like, again, using AI to generate scripts, not like, from the ground up necessarily, right? But to sort of take all of this information that you have access to and to turn it into things like a little bit more quickly and you can read. You've also done lots of, public speaking and recording. You've got a podcast for a long time, those things. So you're really comfortable with a microphone and camera. You just turn it on. It's just amazing. Sometimes I'll wake up one day, check Slack, and there's 20 new videos you sent or something like that, because you're just a machine with pumping that kind of stuff. But it really has been this sort of thing, the kind of stuff that we talk about all the time, or that I talk about all the time, has just kind of slowly and steadily keeping after it for a very long time, along with the product development and all the things that we talked about before, which is like you're releasing new products that are unique in the space, supplements 3.0. You sort of combine those things together, and we've just seen like consistent growth. And so at the level of tactics, like I just think it's one of those things it's helpful, even for me, as I'm like sort of preaching this stuff all the time, to see examples where it's like, man, it works. Like it's not easy. It's not easy. Like it's been a lot of video output. It's been a lot of image, but it works. You give it enough time and it keeps going.
Yeah. And I would say we've had a lot of recent success with UGC, not the earlier kind that we were doing where you go out and you just pay a firm who then has a stable of creators who has not really any relationship with your brand or your products. And I think that shows. And I think especially now as we go into the world of like AI avatars and all of this, like humans are hardwired to trust and relate to other humans. And we've got like this sixth sense of BS detector, right? And so our UGC that's performing well now is from our customers and our we've got like because I train so many healthcare providers over the years, we have lots of health coaches, nutritionists, naturopathic doctors, clinicians in our audience. And these are people who are taking the products, they're getting great results themselves. And then they will make a video and it's really authentic and you can really feel how authentic it is. And that performs very well for us too. But again, that goes back to the products being good in the first place. And then just taking the time to cultivate those relationships, which is still a manual process that requires human input.
I'll always remember a campaign that I worked on with an influencer. It was for like an athletic, athletic goods company, right? So they made things for high level athletes to use. Okay. And I always remember a campaign we did with an athlete who they brought in, signed to be an athlete of theirs, but the athlete had never used the product before and started using the product on the shoot day. And clearly didn't like it. and it was just like, I understand why the athlete took the deal. Like the athlete existed on endorsement deals, basically. Like they weren't making tons and tons of money, but even just their space wasn't super, lucrative for getting salaries or whatever. I understood why the brand did the deal, but like along the way, I remember sitting there and like having somebody say like, feed the athlete lines to say like, and it's just like, this is all terrible. And of course, like none of the none of the ads made a real dent in the business, right? That we have ended up producing. And it's precisely because of that. It's just like, it just wasn't, there just was no authenticity in it. And that was like a really, really big deal. I think this is like undervalued a lot in these kinds of things. It's part of why I really like I know the Kinship guys have talked a lot about their method of influencer seeding, where it's like they just send the product as a gift, no payment, no ask for anything. Because what happens is you can actually form relationships out of that, that are much better and deeper when the person who actually posts about it or makes content actually uses and likes the product. It just comes through. You can feel it. It makes a big difference. And it's a slower build for sure. And maybe at some kind of scale, you go for a big enough name and it just doesn't matter anymore. But like for most of us, it's just like, it's just, I think, a big deal to get that right, especially in the earlier stages. And, I think for you, it's like a perfect example where these people, like, you can just tell, like, these people are clearly like, oh my gosh, I started taking this and I was already taking these other things from you because I already believed in you. I've been following your stuff for a long time. I've been talking about it for a long time. I love it. Here's how it changed, my body or my behaviors or whatever. And it just really, really comes through. I think it's just really underrated. If you do that though, you can actually generate a ton of content that's usable and reusable in all kinds of ways. You can launch all of it in the ad account with manual bids. Like it's just, you can get a lot of content and it can really, really matter.
It can be whitelisting too, depending on the person. If they're an influencer themselves and have an audience, which we're exploring.
Yeah.
We should probably talk about email a little bit too, because I think that's something else.
Yeah.
That,
let's do this. Let's talk just on the ad account one more thing, because people have heard me do all this. This is probably a good chance for me to drop in the FERMAT comment really fast. This was a big moment for us. We switched. This is the thing that we did right with this testing mentality is people who listen to me for a while have heard me do FERMAT ad reads. I've talked about a client that saw a 50% spend increase when we switched to FERMAT. Well, this is that client. And so I think it's fair to say at this point. And so that's why when I was talking with FERMAT about doing this episode, I was very happy to do it because it's a true story. Like we switched to FERMAT. We started doing that, especially to drive these subscription focused funnels. We were able to measure the percentage of subscribers on every page. So as we have an offer of a subscription offer versus a full price or a one-time payment offer, as you go side by side in FERMAT, we could not only promote that offer in a way that was effective, but also see very clearly on the back end measurement wise what percentage of people were taking the subscription offer versus not. So if you're running anything like that where you really want a customer to take offer A instead of B, it's just it's easy to see the analytics. It's been an important part of how we have grown, and like I said, it was a major thing. So the FERMAT guys don't even want me to go too crazy on this or anything. They said people wanted to hear about it, but I don't know if there's anything on your side that stands out to you, Chris, about how we've done that.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to some of the specifics too. One is what you mentioned, just offer testing. We had some hypotheses that turned out to be right, and we had some that turned out to be wrong. But we were able to test them very quickly and effectively using the FERMAT pages, which would have been onerous if we were building all that stuff ourselves, and even impossible in some cases if you're just sending traffic to the PDP. You're not really going to be able to do those kinds of tests. I mentioned email just now, and that's also tied to FERMAT now, and that's actually was a huge unlock for us because we were. Up until recently, when we would send out email, we would link just to the PDP if we were talking about a product. And then we were like, oh, wait a sec. We should probably be making the same offer to our email subscribers as we are on paid social, that 30% discount on the first subscription. And in order to do that, we need to use the FERMAT. We're going to send the traffic to the same FERMAT landing pages. Well, we tripled the number of weekly subscriptions we are acquiring in February compared to our 6-month average before that. And we doubled the number of net new subscribers that we're acquiring. That's not just because of email. There's been a big increase in ad spend recently because of a product we launched, which we can talk about if you want. But it just makes it so easy. And then we're about to relaunch our affiliate program, and I know we're going to be using FERMAT landers for that. We can easily create a customized lander for a high performing affiliate, which is a great thing to be able to offer. And, we can do that in 10 seconds, or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Not have to code that thing ourselves or even use one of the other landing page software. So I've been super impressed with that. And as you said, there's been a few major unlocks along the way that led to nonlinear increases in our ad spend. And that's definitely been one of the more recent ones.
The way I'd frame it for us is that because the funnels for this business, like again, supplements, right? Like supplement A, let's just take our multivitamin. Somebody could be taking two people could be taking our multivitamin for very different reasons from one another, right? Because it has numerous benefits. Okay.
Yeah.
Or our colostrum product, right? Like it's the same deal. There's maybe the person who's thinking about digestive health, gut health, like bloating, that kind of thing. There's maybe somebody else who's thinking about like recovery, performance recovery, that kind of stuff. Maybe even somebody else thinking about skin, hair, and nails, and sort of like that kind of the way that sort of inside out inner beauty, not inner beauty, inside out beauty focus, right? And those are three different claims and three different funnels with the same product. The ability to spin out variations of those landers extremely fast and then test them and have like very clear measurability. And then to do it, like you said, across multiple channels as well. To me, like that, it's sort of that combination of speed, measurability, has been like really crucial for us.
And focus. Like that's what you're getting at here is
yes.
Now we have an ad. So for Biome Protect, we have, it's our probiotic, prebiotic, postbiotic polyphenol. Some people take it for gut health. Some people take it for skin health. Some people take it to reduce bloating. And we can have an ad that's about bloating that goes to a landing page about bloating. And the offer, everything is consistent all the way through. Whereas, that would have been so time intensive to do before FERMAT.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
We have like we just passed, what was it? Like we have like 320 funnels now that we've created. I remember
right.
We passed the 300 mark.
That was concepts. That was ad
concepts.
Yeah. That was ad concepts, over 300. It was like 320 ad concepts. And that's before you talk about sort of all the influencer content and all that kind of stuff. Right. It's like, and the thing is, like, the other thing we do a lot of, right, is like an ad starts sending it to like one FERMAT page, and we'll be, okay, well, what happens if we like create a custom FERMAT page just for this one ad? Yeah. And again, the ease and speed with which you can do that just makes it a much more palatable thing to do without, like, we don't have a big team, right? So has been really crucial. So like I said, this episode is brought to you by FERMAT, and I'm so glad to represent FERMAT on this show because everything I just said in that exchange is completely true. So go to fermatcommerce.com/AF if you want to look into it today. fermatcommerce.com/AF. Let's get back to it. The other thing about this is AI. And I think to come back to this a little bit, the speed of output that we've been able to do with taking, building the sort of combo of AI tools into ad lander with FERMAT and then email has been crucial. We talked about this a little bit, but like, I'm just curious to hear sort of anything else you want to say. Maybe some of this you want to keep closer to the vest. I don't know, but about how we've sort of been able to do that to generate all of this content with a team that is not that big.
Well, I'll give you a recent example. So I mentioned that we created AI avatars using product reviews and transcripts from UGC, and then of course the PD, the PDP. So like with ChatGPT Deep Research, which is it's based on the O3 model from OpenAI, which is the most advanced model out there, or it changes weekly. So probably by the time this podcast comes out, it won't be the case anymore. But you can, it can crawl the web too. So you can give it links. You can link it to the product page and then upload that other stuff and say, you're a digital marketing expert. I want to create, 3 avatars, customer avatars based on all this information. Go. And then it will ask you some clarifying questions and it will come back with a shockingly good result. And then I fed each avatar into an AI image generation tool and asked it to generate an image for each avatar, which was actually almost kind of perfectly matched what my internal imagining of what that avatar looked like was. It did a phenomenal job. And then I took those avatars, and you can take those avatars into one of the LLMs and say, these are our avatars for this particular product. Come up with, generate a list of 10 concepts or angles that you think would appeal. Actually, I think the way I did it was 5 angles or concepts for each avatar for a particular product. And then it comes back with these ideas. And of course, not all of them are going to be good. And a lot of them are ones we've already tried ourselves, but there were a few that were legitimately good. And then you can say, okay, well, let's expand on idea number 2 for avatar number 3. And then it will, come spit out some content and be like, okay, I'm going to take that now and just like in 5 or 10 minutes with my own voice and editing, change that into an ad script, or turn that into an email, which again, that entire process that I just described would have been days, if not weeks of work, qualitative, calling customers on the phone, doing surveys, blah, 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 and then coming up with a list of brainstorming, a list of concepts, and then doing the initial writing, et cetera. That literally took me, that whole process that I just described took me like an hour or less for one of our products. You woke up that day and saw it in Slack. I had two of them. I had done it for 2 of our products. Oh, and then the other thing is what you can do is you can build a custom GPT. This is within ChatGPT. You feed it these. I've done this for each product. So you put the avatar info in there, you put all the product info in there, and then you can query the GPT. You can ask the GPT questions about the avatar. You can even ask it to assume the persona of one of the avatars, and then you can ask it questions like, what were your biggest fears before you started to take this product? What feelings were you experiencing? Like what, and the responses are incredible. Like, it's like you're talking to that person. So that's the most recent example. And it's been a game changer.
Yeah. I recently released some content about how I think I mentioned that I have a video editor who in one day shipped 237 videos. And look, that editor, that probably represented a few days of work in certain ways. The editor does not do that every day. We're not shipping 237 videos a day at AJF Growth. Okay. It was just a compelling social media way to make a point that the point is 100% true. And it's this: the ability of AI to speed up and therefore reduce the price of creative production is unbelievable. And that is the big point that I have tried to make to people. And I've made that point with reference to a number of things that I think about and do, including sort of the way we do creative testing, which is that like we could not test all of this creative if we had to actually deploy actual dollars to test each piece of creative, right? We would not be able to do this thing that we're doing because it would cost too much money on the distribution side for us to like actually put testing dollars towards every ad at meaningful scale. So there's that. What people have responded to me with about that is 2 things. One of them is they're like wowed and they're going, okay, how do I do that? In my experience, like, there's a lot of reasons why that is a very, very short-term concern, I think. But people want to know how to do it. But the other thing people have said to me is they've said, well, if you're just spamming the internet with crappy AI ads, and and what I want somebody to hear when they hear you talk about what you just described is to combine that with what you said earlier, which is that you're doing this as a way to speed up the generation of extremely information-rich advertising. It is not BS spam. It is not that. It is like really high-quality stuff that comes from the fact that it's leveraged by you with all of your knowledge and some of those things. And so this is the point, is that like by getting really good with those tools and then doing that in support of a business model that fundamentally works, you're able to generate so much output so fast and so much easier than you would have been able to do before, that now you can take tools like manual bids on meta ads or FERMAT or, your Klaviyo flows or whatever it is, which these are all just tools that help you reach people, right? And leverage them so much more aggressively with really, really good content, because you're able to just like speed up the output of those things. So it's not about creating stuff that's bad at scale. That's not the idea at all. It's the opposite. Like, I don't know. I think one of the things that most impresses you about AI, even when you read it still and you pass stuff along, or use it still and you pass stuff along, is just how good it is, is like, it's like, you have all this knowledge to compare it to.
It's also, there's been a big learning curve, as you know, like you've seen the iterations I've gone through. And one of the things that I've learned about how to use it is curating the input to some degree, especially with scientific research. Like there is still a hallucination problem outside of like using something like Consensus AI, which is purpose built for research. But if you go right now and ask ChatGPT to like prepare a report on the effects of curcumin on bone health, and you put citations in there, it's gonna, at least half of those citations are going to be completely fabricated, and the other half, if you click through to look at what it says the citation is about, you'll see a physics study or something completely random that has nothing to do with it. So like a better way to use it is to do the research with Consensus AI to get the real studies, for example, then upload those and tell ChatGPT to limit its response to only information that's in those studies. And so then you're putting a constraint on it, and it will do much better and it will be much more reliable in that situation. And I think it's kind of the same as what you just said. Like, we're not using AI to just generate fluff. Like, we're using it as a tool to streamline a process that ordinarily would be very time and labor intensive. And I did it before. Like before, at Kresser Institute, I had a team of 6 research assistants. I had master's degree and PhD level research assistants who were essentially performing this same task. They would do the initial broad wave of research. They would read the papers. They would annotate them and summarize them. They would then bring them to me, present them to me, and then I would take that information and share it with my audience, and oftentimes end up reading the original paper myself if it was really interesting. Now I have a $20 a month team of researchers to do that. So it's just leveraging it in a way that extends what we would have already been doing anyway.
And this is a specific use case with supplements where there's this medical scientific component, right? But the point is, there are places in every production process where this can be useful, right? Whatever your product category or whatever else. And that's I think the key idea that I've tried to get across for people is like, this is where, if you think of it as a magic machine, it has some use for sure to do that. You can just spam stuff, whatever. But the place I'm most impressed with that isn't the kind of thing that you're talking about here, where it's like, you're using it to massively speed up research and quality output and some of that. And then you can plug that in. And the thing is, like you said too, it's getting better at a breakneck pace. And so whatever we say right now will be outdated by the time this is released. And every tool that
ChatGPT 4.5 literally came out like a minute before we got on here. And I was like, oh shoot, I got to do this podcast with Andrew. I can't go play around with 4.5, but I'll be doing that as soon as we get off, for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, amazing. All right, well, let's do that. Let's get off. Chris, the number one way people can follow you and what you're doing is probably by going to adaptnaturals.com and buying some supplements and checking out out what you're doing there. Yeah.
Kresser.com is my home base. That's where lots of free articles and content, my podcast, etc.
Yes. If you want to take a deep dive into functional health, which you should do, by the way, as well, that would be good for you as well. And Chris, thanks for your time. Thanks for your openness about things that are working in the business. And let's keep after it.
Yeah, you're welcome, Andrew. It's a pleasure.
Thanks so much for watching or listening to this episode. I hope it was helpful to you. I'd love your feedback. podcast@ajfgrowth.com. Like I said, if you want that cohort forecast, that's one of the free e-commerce resources I send you at my website. If you sign up for my newsletter there, ajfgrowth.com, go do that. You can also subscribe wherever you're watching or listening, of course, like I said. And don't forget to follow up with FERMAT. FERMAT has been a great partner for this business in pretty much every possible way. I recommend them very joyfully and very gladly to you. If you heard us talk and your business sounds anything like our business, or not necessarily in the same category, but if there's ways in which you think it could be useful to you, I'm really happy to recommend FERMAT to you. I think they're awesome. I've continued to push on making sure that I maintain a sponsorship relationship with them because I really believe in them. I think it's a great product. So check it out. FERMATcommerce.com/AF is the place to go get that. FERMATcommerce.com/AF. Go check it out today. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you next time.